Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today we're going to give our hot take of the game we just finished playing, Brass Birmingham. But before we jump into a description of the game...
A little bit of news for me. I made an appearance on the Board Game Community Show hosted by Riley Stock. That's available to listen to right now if you're interested in hearing me babble a little more about stuff. I want to thank Riley for having me on the show.
I've got some poll results. I asked a question on Twitter. Listen, first of all, I have to admit, not a very interesting question, but it was just something I felt like talking about at the time. I said, one of my favorite things about modern board games are the bonuses that trigger from doing some actions. Games that do this all the time, Ark Nova, Hadrian's Wall. There are just so many games where you're just taking a normal action and you get to a certain point and then a bonus triggers. And it makes me happy. So I said, these games are full of little dopamine hits that make me happy. How do you feel about them? And I didn't know, honestly, it's something I really like in games, but I know some people probably, they don't want to be pushed to do these little things. They don't want to feel like they're being triggered. It's triggering their addiction senses. So I asked how people felt about them. My options were, they're my favorite, which is how I answered. Yes, please. Whatever. Or the devil's work. How did you guys answer that, Paul?
Wow, how evocative.
I answered this one, so not the devil's work, one up from there. What was that one?
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. So I like them, these bonuses, if they're, you mentioned a dopamine hits, like a drug addict. I like these if they're used in moderation. Some games, Merchants of the Dark Road, for instance, had this okay, now you get this little tiny bonus, or you get this little tiny bonus, check for this bonus, check for this. So in that case, I was like, I don't care about these bonuses, in quotes, that don't do anything. So that's a case where it was bonus soup, too many bonuses to make it fun anymore. They became tedious. So I like it when they're used in moderation.
Yeah, I would say that I think that's one of the big flaws of that in a game. And, I still like it, but it is a lot to track sometimes. And, Rajas of the Ganges, the Dice Charmers is a great example. Playing that where, okay, I do this thing and I get this bonus. Well, I get two different bonuses for doing this thing. So now I got to track this bonus, do this one, and then, I get another bonus. So let me take care of that one. Wait, did I miss this other bonus? And, that could happen even like Ark Nova, and it could happen in Hadrian's Wall. There's a lot of games where they can cascade, and that can be a little bit of a challenge to track.
Yeah, so I don't want the game to be, can I keep track of the bonuses the best? I want to be able to work hard, work to a goal, and then get what I foresaw happening. I don't want these bonuses if I didn't even see them, if I didn't even know that I was supposed to get them. That's not cool if you just dumbed into them. So if it gets to the point where you're just lucking into all these bonuses, then I don't see the point in that. What's your thoughts, Chris?
Well, actually, I have a question. So what constitutes a bonus?
Well, so what I was thinking is okay, let's say that you're just doing a normal turn, and then something that you've done that turn triggers a bonus. So let's take, for example, Tapestry. You're placing an income building into a region, and when you complete that region, all of a sudden, boom, you just got a free resource out of it. But if you'd placed an income building in a different region that didn't get completed, then it's just a normal turn. You just get the bonus of having that income building out. In Ark Nova, you're moving up the donation track or whatever it is, the second scoring track. And most of the time you don't get a bonus immediately, but there's a couple spaces where you hit it, boom, you get a bonus for it. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of, is where something that you're just doing normally in the game, occasionally you get to trigger something else.
I have an example of where the combos can get kind of crazy. In Terraforming Mars, one of the games we know well. So say, for instance, you put that plant down on a space on the map on Terraforming Mars. Okay, that gives you 2 titanium. You grab those. That raises the oxygen one, so that ups your TR one. Maybe that oxygen ups the temperature one. That raises the temperature one. And then maybe raising that temperature gives you an ocean. Okay, so you have to put another ocean down on the Terraforming Mars. I put it on another 2 plant one, which is next to 3 other oceans, which gives me $6. So that is a game, a scenario in Terraforming Mars where you just have all these combos collecting this and this and that, and I can see the disappeal, the unappeal of something like that.
I'm glad you mentioned Terraforming Mars, because I actually think that's why, Ark Nova, which is a very similar game to Terraforming Mars, I feel like it's an evolution. Terraforming Mars has 3 bonuses that you trigger. I mean, yeah, there's a couple places on the board you place a tile. Those are bonuses, that's true. But, you move up the temperature track and there's 3 places you're going to get something special. You move up the oxygen track, there's 1 place you're going to get something special. So it's a little competition for those couple places versus an Ark Nova where there's like dozens of places where as you're moving up a track, you're going to get something. And I like it more. I like it more when that's going to happen more frequently. That you got to set up your turn and plan for, hey, I can have this bigger turn because these things are going to happen. Not 3 times in a game, but like 15 times in a game. I like it.
Yeah, I was asking the question because, like, honestly, I feel like there's a dividing line in there somewhere where it goes from a bonus to just another mechanism of the game, a basic turn. And so maybe what we're talking about here is a situation where something that you do throughout the game only under certain circumstances triggers an added benefit. I guess I'm just sort of trying to work through the definition of what I would consider a bonus. And a bonus should feel like a bonus, right? I mean, I enjoy them when they do. And I was surprised, Adam, that you had brought up Merchants of the Dark Road, because honestly, I don't remember that game having much in the way of what I would consider real bonuses, which is one of the things that I found kind of unsatisfying about it.
Agreed. I couldn't remember when a bonus triggered either. For example, if you'd been filling up your little cart merchants, and then if you managed to cover over a couple specific spaces, then you would get something extra. That would have been a bonus that would have been fun to puzzle around. And I think that was missing in that game.
Yeah, and I take your guys' point on merchants.
Yeah. Terraforming Mars is a good example, though, because that's a really good example of a bonus, because the whole game you're moving up these tracks, but every once in a while you get that bonus and you can plan around it, which is one of the things that makes it exciting. You're racing for those bonuses, and I think that adds a lot of excitement. But I agree with you guys. If you throw too many of those in there and they're not really special anymore, to me, that almost takes it out of the realm of being a bonus and just doesn't make it fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, I have some poll results here. So this is how people answered. And listen, again, I know this wasn't a very interesting question, but it was a fun topic to talk about. So 32% said they're my favorite. So they feel the same way I do. You like lots of bonuses. 50% said yes, please. So almost everybody likes having little bonuses that trigger during a game. 18% are like Adam, little downers, whatever. They don't care. And nobody hates bonuses, apparently. And I was kind of surprised by that, because I thought either that they wouldn't like it because it kind of tricks you into being happy about something, or because it does complicate the turns to some extent. So I thought some people would not like it, but apparently not a single person. This is a very scientific poll. Not a single person that responded on a Twitter poll, a whole 22 votes, didn't answer that way. So I think generally people like these bonuses. Not surprising.
Wouldn't that basically be like hating kittens or babies?
Yeah, probably. Well, let's jump into a description of Brass Birmingham.
In Brass Birmingham, 2 to 4 players take the role of industrialists in the coal country of England during the Industrial Revolution. If you're still listening after that description, great, because this game has much to offer. In a round, players take turns doing 2 actions each, ranging from linking 2 cities, building in a city, selling goods, taking a loan, or developing a technology. Through these actions, players can increase their income, which is collected at the end of every round, interact with the coal and iron market, which may be another source of income or additional payment, and also interacting with player-provided resources available on the board. Scoring occurs twice, once at mid-game and again at the end of the game. Links, which is a boat in the first era or a train in the second era, are scored by counting the link points of the buildings in each adjacent city. Buildings are only scored if they've been flipped. Flipping a building occurs either when you sell it, which usually requires a beer, or when all the commodities have been removed from that building, which can be beer, iron, or coal. And this is where many of the market and interaction nuances occur. For example, perhaps I'd like to build an iron mine, which requires coal, so I use coal from Tim's coal mine, which causes his mine to flip, giving him points and income. Now that my iron mine is built, I can sell it back to the market, resulting in some additional income for me. Next, Chris builds a brewery using the rest of my iron, and with his next action, sells 2 of his previously built industries, resulting in a massive turn for Chris. This will flip his brewery and the 2 buildings he just sold. So the first era ends once players expend all cards in the deck and in hand, points are tallied, level 1 industries and all links are removed, and the process is repeated for the second era. There's some placement restrictions based on cards in hand, existing networks on the map, which adds to the puzzle. And I left out many of the rules nuances, but this will provide a little context for the discussion. Brass Birmingham was designed by Martin Wallace and published by Roxy Games in 2018.
All right, so let's talk about the gameplay and mechanisms of Brass Birmingham. So just a little background here. Adam, you've owned this game for several years, so I think you probably played it a half dozen times at least. I've played a few times, once in person, a couple times online. Chris has played it a couple times online. So we'll jump in and talk a little bit about what stands out to us. Adam, why don't you start?
We'll start with the hand management. So there's so much going on in this game, but it kind of all starts with 8 cards in your hand. And how are you going to use those cards, and what's available to you, what's going to be available to you in the future? How are you going to use those to get the actions that you want to get, whether that's build some links or a building? You have to make that decision. That's one of the first decisions you're looking at right away, is that hand management. What do you guys think about that? And I think the interesting part is how that integrates with the rest of the turns.
Yeah, so I like it a lot, and I like the fact that it kind of sets what you can do. You know, to some extent, it limits some of the actions you can do, specifically the build actions. You can only build related to the cards that are in your hands. What's funny about it, though, is that like there's a lot of actions like building a link that it doesn't matter what card you use, or taking a loan. You know, there's several of them. You just discard a card. And I always find myself like, okay, I probably am not going to need this card in this era, so I'll just discard a card. And then ultimately, of course, I was like, oh man, why didn't I think that whole era through and figure out exactly what I was going to do? So right. I actually do enjoy it, but it does lead to a little bit of frustration in that I don't want to sit there and plan out 8 more rounds. And if I planned out 8 more rounds, I probably could figure out whether I should have discarded that card. But I don't want to do that. So I just discard whatever thing doesn't seem useful in the next round or two. And then it ends up biting me. How about you, Chris? Does that work for you, or is it a pain for you?
I like the hand management. I like the fact that at least the card part of it is pretty simple. You've either got a wild card, you got a city card, or you've got a card that reflects an industry of some sort. And that's great. I actually like that mechanism a lot. Now, I do have some issues with the way that it plays out once you get past the hand management part. But just, talking about the discrete hand management piece, I actually like that. I think that's nice, and I think that it keeps things moving along nicely without a lot of confusion.
Chris, so why don't you talk about what is one of the things that you have issues with?
That once you get past hand management, this thing is so freaking fiddleicious. It's like hard to keep track of what the hell you're doing. So it's like, I mean, honestly, by the end of this, I still don't think I understand placement rules, and which came to the forefront at the end of our game, where I realized that I had made, or you guys realized that I had made like at least 2, maybe 3 placements of things that weren't really legal. And I'm not sure I understand. I still don't understand why. But I mean, other than just my bitterness at having completely screwed up my game on that one, I felt like there's so much complication in where you can place things and the specific rules around them that it gets really confusing. So for example, if you had a city card, you could build any industry that's in that city if you play the city card. Or if you have an industry card, you can play that in any city as long as it has that industry. That would kind of be, consistent and understandable. But that's not the way it works, that you have certain things where if you have a network for certain cards, it allows you to do certain things, but other situations, it doesn't allow you to do those things. Like I said, I can't even really describe it because I'm not sure I really understand it at this point.
And this is one of the biggest complaints when you're learning the game, is the network distinction versus what you're connected to. And that can be one of the most confusing parts of the game for sure, Chris. So I totally understand what you're saying. But Tim, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I think it does hurt the approachability of the game a little bit. And I also ran into a couple dumb things that I made because I wasn't quite disconnecting the fact that you can't build a route if you don't already have a route connected. You can't build an industry with an industry card if you don't have a route connected. But if you have the city card, you can build it wherever you want to. So there are some quirks with it that I was starting to get by the end of the game. If it had been less than a year since I'd played it again before, it probably would have been not too hard. And because the actions of the game are pretty straightforward, it's okay that there's a little bit of complication there, but it's going to take you a game or two to really kind of get a sense for how everything flows and understand some of those weird rules that are going on here. And I think that's it's a Martin Wallace. It's kind of like his MO, right? I mean, he's got weird rules. Like that's what he does with games. So that's something you should expect here.
So after my first few plays, your brain starts to get the hang of that, right? So the feeling I get from this game now, and it's not necessarily one mechanism, but it's the feeling of you go out, you see what you can do with your 2 cards, and maybe that's a dead end because I don't have that commodity for that city that I need to do. And then so you go down a different route, and boom, this one links together with this one, so I can combo that. Hey, that's pretty good. Or then maybe you're looking ahead to your next turn. If I spend the least money, then I can go, potentially 4 times in a row. And how am I going to take this as far as I can using these cards that I have? So that, I don't know if I'm describing the puzzle well, but that's how it feels on my brain. It's this kind of sense of, I can go this far, and I can go a little further if I do it this way, a little further if I do it this way. And look at this. I found my way through this whole little maze. I can play these 2 cards. It's going to be perfection. And that feels so good when you find that way through the maze there.
So the one thing that I didn't get with this, and maybe is kind of one of the things that's throwing me off, is the difference between what constitutes your network for different purposes. So at some points you have a network that includes other people's trains or boats that you can use to move things, but there are other times when it has to all be your stuff.
Right. So your network is like a city where you have a building, or a city that's linked via one of your trains or canals. So where you have your color stuff out there.
Yeah. What Chris is talking about is that like you can use coal that's connected through somebody else's network. You can use beer that's connected through somebody else's network. You can sell goods that's connected through somebody else's network, but you can't build when it's connected through somebody else's network. And so that's kind of the weird quirkiness of the rule set here, is that you've got the same components that interact in different ways depending on the action you're taking. And that's I think that's the biggest challenge with it. It's just, it's weird and it's quirky, and you just have to completely wrap your head around all those different mechanisms.
Let me say one other thing about that. I'm trying to see it through, I can see what you're saying, Adam, that once you get it, there's a puzzle there, and it's kind of like I said, a maze. And I'm trying to sort of put myself in that mindset and seeing how that could be kind of charming and fun. And I do. I mean, I can see how that would work. But I think, Tim, you had commented that it definitely affects the approachability of the game. And I think that's also true. So, you could have, which is funny because the first time we played this, I think I had a different experience than this time I played it. So apparently last time my brain was working better with it than it was this time. But, it just, I wonder when we talk about those levels of complication, does it serve the game?
I think that's a great question, Chris, and I don't know if it does, but it's one of the top rated games of all time, and apparently is serving plenty of people. And again, Chris, I think we got 2 complications here with our experience. One is that you and I, over a year since the last time we played it. So we're coming in, it's basically like learning a new game, and heavier games, they take a little bit of effort to get through and understand. Mm-hmm. Secondly, both of these experiences that you and I have had in the last year and a half have been on online experience. I think last time it was on Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah.
This time it's on Tabletopia. That's not a good way to learn a game, especially a complicated heavy lane. We can do it, but I have a feeling that if it had been in person, we could have been talking through and explaining stuff to you a little bit more, Chris, without you having to zoom around the board and everything. It probably would have been an easier experience. So fair concern there, and I think that it is a more challenging game probably than it needs to be, but also probably adds to some really interesting decisions once you really wrap your head around it.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think you're right. I think that the online manner of playing this game definitely had an impact on it. I mean, this is, I don't know how long this is supposed to be, but we jumped right into it, and this ended up being a 4-hour game. And a big chunk of that had nothing to do with the actual game itself. It had to do with just the mechanism of zooming around the screen and trying to get your little electronic hand to pick up chits and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And the last thing I want to say about playing on Tabletopia is Roxley Games, listen, this mod, as far as we can tell, was put out when the Kickstarter was still live, because this is not the finished rules. It wasn't the finished map. There are things that have been changed since then. We're in a pandemic. People are playing games online. If you're going to put a game out there and leave it up on a platform like Tabletopia, update it. It could have taken you probably half an hour to get this thing updated with normal components, and we just probably wasted an hour trying to figure out rules and crap that didn't work after a year of development on the game. All right, let's move on past the challenges with online stuff. Let's talk about what's amazing about this game, and that is the kind of the shared economy here. You got the coal economy, you got the iron economy, you've got the beer economy, you've got the networks. Like everything here that you do is going to give other people options to do. Everything that they do is going to potentially take away options for you to do. It's going to make things cost more. It's going to make things cost less. Wow, it's such a cool, interesting, like set of things that are just happening on top of each other. That's so fun here. My favorite part, I love the coal and the iron economy. It reminds me a lot of Power Grid in some ways, but I think it works really cool here. The fact that you can build an iron mine, and if there's spaces available, you immediately sell that stuff and you can get some income for it. But if you don't sell it, now other people can get it for free from you. I mean, just so many cool little pieces about what you do is going to change what other people can do. And I really love that. Adam, what do you think about that? You seem to like that kind of shared economy situation that happens in games.
I absolutely love the economy here, Tim. Just that feeling of being able to put an iron mine or a coal mine out there right away, have those pieces go right back to the market, flip it right away. Sometimes I just do it to my own detriment, just because it's so fun to get those things, get some money and flip it and get those points right away. I love the economy here, Tim. You nailed it. There's interaction with the other players. It brings it in. It makes it all tied together. It makes it so like, oh, what if he does this and I do that and she does this and what's going to happen? Chris, what are your thoughts on the economy here?
Well, I think the economy is a lot of fun in this game. And I think what's interesting, you commented on you doing things to your own detriment. But the reality is there's nothing in here that is entirely to your detriment, because even if you do give someone else free coal, for example, if they use up your coal, you're going to get to flip your coal token, and that just gave you a bunch of points. So there's really, it's sort of like a real economy. Everybody at every stage, somebody's giving up something, but they're also getting something else. In every interaction is a cost benefit analysis, and I think that makes it really interesting.
The one thing I found interesting with this game, and I've only played it a few times, but I've never seen the coal or iron economy get more than basically $4 per, right? And the economy looks like it could get a lot more aggressive. And I played it at 2 players and 4 players. What do you guys think that we're doing wrong that we're not full? Like, why would you pay $6, $7, $8 for a piece of coal? How is this situation ever going to happen where that's going to occur? Am I missing something here, or are we just too amateur to find opportunities to take advantage of that?
No, we're just that good.
I think there's slight ways to manipulate it. It's difficult though to be able to get $7, $6, $5 per chunk of coal or per chunk of iron out there. I'm not sure if I've ever seen it either, and I've played, like you said, Tim, maybe a dozen times or so.
Yeah, it just seems too valuable to be able to build a coal thing and get $12 or $13 back. So you're getting more than you put out there. You get the ongoing income. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear if any listeners have played this and you know why that happens frequently. That's pretty interesting. Maybe they just built it there as a fail-safe in case somebody's totally messing things up. But I can't imagine a situation where it would actually go that high. Anyway, it's pretty interesting. Now, I do have one negative comment here. I probably have a couple, but one thing that I really don't like about this game is the first player selection option. And I think it's very fair, right? The idea is that if you spend the most money in a turn, then you're going to be last place. And so basically whoever spends the most money in the previous round is going to go last, and then, so on up to the lowest spending person is going to the top. That means somebody that got to do a lot of stuff, they're going to get less opportunities. And it gives you some choices too, like, hey, do I want to not do this thing because I might be able to go early in the next round, which could make a big difference. It's an interesting choice. It's a fair choice. It's so much work though to track it. Even playing in person, I know online is tough, but when I played this in person, the habit of when you're spending something in any game, intuitively you throw your money to the market and then you take your turn. In this game, I remember even in my first play where it was like constantly, Adam's like, no, Tim, don't put that in. How much did you spend there? Because we need to put that on your player space. And then you got to count all that money at the end of the round and rotate it. It's just a big mess. I'm sure that could have been a little bit more streamlined. It's an interesting choice, and it's not terrible, but it's just, do I really want to go through that every time I'm counting up money and make sure I'm putting it in the right place to have to manipulate that every round? That's a lot of extra work.
Tim, I totally agree. After playing this game a bunch of times in person, even when you're doing it right and quick. You still have to probably make some change every once in a while, and then you have to count it up, see who spent the most, and switch everything around, and then put it back to the bank, and then how much is your income going to be? So yeah, I think it's cool as a strategy. Like, okay, maybe I can go from fourth in turn order to first, get those 4 turns in a row, or do I want to try to stay in first and so I can put out beers early in the round and let the people later in the round use my beers. So I like it as a strategy, but you nailed it. Tracking it is a pain in the butt.
Yeah. All right. Any other mechanisms you guys want to mention?
I have another one that I think is kind of interesting, the scoring in this game. So whether you're looking at scoring primarily from links or from buildings or a combination of them both, I think it's just a fascinating way, just getting those link points versus building points. Steve did really well. He capitalized on he was getting 7 or 8 points per train in the rail era scoring. So he took full advantage of that. I don't know. You guys have any thoughts on the different kinds of scoring here?
I'm glad you brought that up because that's probably my other minor complaint about the game, and that is that I have no idea how anyone's doing throughout the course of the game. I mean, you only score really significantly at the end of the first era, which is halfway through the game, and at the end of the game. And I mean, I don't know. I'm sure that if I was sitting there on the board and wanted to count out every link in between my round and count out all the buildings that have been built so far and stuff like that, I could keep a little bit better track of that. But that's a lot of bookkeeping, both during the course of the round to see how you're doing and who you need to push back and stuff like that. But also at the end of the round, I mean, how long did it take us? 15 minutes at the end of each era to go through and count every link for every player and then count every building for every player. Yeah, not my favorite for sure, the way that scoring's tracked. It's interesting that there's multiple paths to victory. Do you want to just take advantage of building tracks and, build them around the cities that are the busiest? Hey, yeah, people are they want to use your train, so you're going to get points for that. Or do you want to just build the most buildings? Or I built all the pottery buildings this round, which I think is the first time I've seen that happen. And so, yeah, there's lots of points for building that unique commodity. So it's cool that there's different opportunities to score, to build there. But I don't love tracking the scoring or not being able to track it during the course of the rounds and then having to add it all up at the end. What about you, Chris?
That actually reminded me of a couple things to mention here. And one of them was about the scoring. And one of them is I never quite cracked the code of the buildings and how, as you progress, they change and give you benefits. Because, the standard way of having, a game mechanism apply as you go up a track is things get better and better and better as you go up the track. And this one doesn't quite seem to fit into that mold in the standard way. I mean, I kind of leaned in heavy on selling, I don't know what it was, these boxes that you can sell. Yeah. And I obviously didn't look that far ahead. I just figured, oh, well, I'm just going to start doing these boxes. And then the farther I go, the more powerful they're going to get. But then they don't. You kind of start going up that track. And again, I could have paid more attention. I mean, so that's on me. But it just seems like an odd way to have, once you get up to the middle of the track, things start tapering off and then they're not as powerful anymore. So, I mean, why would you continue to go up that track? So I never quite got that piece of it.
I think it's just some of the weird quirkiness of Martin Wallace's design again happening here. I think there's interesting things that you can glean from that. Does it pay off for me to build this box because it doesn't do anything, but maybe the next one's going to be more valuable? And it adds into that whole, what's a develop feature or whatever it is, where you can basically get rid of tiles out of your thing. I think that's all part of the strategy, and so obviously some of them are going to be less valuable. So you want to skip past those and get to other ones, but do you want to waste a turn developing? Or do you want to just go ahead and play those less valuable ones? So I know it is very weird, Chris. I have definitely not cracked that code yet. I have no idea what's the right move. It's also funny how some of the buildings, you have to use certain ones in the first era. And if you don't, then you have to develop past them to get into the next era. Probably fairly thematic in some ways if you really dig in and think about it, that certain technologies just wouldn't be valuable after a certain time period because people have outgrown it. But it is definitely very weird, and it does not feel like a normal flow there. I'm guessing though something that probably after many more plays. Adam, I don't know, you played this more than us. Does that kind of make a little bit more sense for you?
My mind is getting blown because everything you're saying, I totally get and I totally understand. And it's funny how all of the stuff in my brain just makes total sense. Again,
Okay.
I've played it.
So you played it more than I thought. Yeah.
I played it, 20 to 30 times is how many times I've played it. So all this stuff is firmly in my brain. Well, that totally makes sense to me. And that totally makes sense to me. But everything you guys saying when you guys explain it, I'm like, dude, what a weird rule. That doesn't make any sense. Like, that's a lot of stuff you got to remember for getting through this game. So everything that's totally sunken into me, I get it. It's not there yet for you guys. It's kind of a neat perspective to have.
I think it's an element of saying that the game is a little bit hard to get into, but also probably has a lot to explore and a lot to discover and a lot to get better at, which is what you kind of want out of a heavier game, a heavier strategy game. So I think in a lot of ways, it does feel more complicated than it needs to be on a first play, but I don't think it really is overly complicated. I think in a lot of ways, it's actually a pretty streamlined system that's just going to take a little bit of work to get through at first, which is something I wouldn't be as gracious about with other games, because I honestly do think that this is a pretty smart system that's all put together here.
Another thing that I was thinking of as you were talking about scoring, it's the transition between the two eras. And I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it's definitely a big thing. And it's that you wipe the board between the two eras. So you spend your whole first era building up this extensive canal system and, building out your routes to get things from one place to another and, building your factories and all that. And then the end of their era hits and it gets wiped. Other than I think maybe we had collectively on the four of us, maybe 2 or 3 factories that stayed because they were high enough of a level to stay on the board. But then you're starting all over again. What did you guys think about that?
When I first read the rule book about that, I thought I was going to hate it. I hate the idea of developing something and then just having it go away. But every time I played it, it's not felt as bad as I thought it was going to be. You do have a little progression. You do have some income coming in. You already, you've built the income from the first round. You maybe have a couple buildings that are left over, so your routes are there. And it also opens up so many new opportunities. The things that were blocked off to you towards the end of the first era, all of a sudden they're available to you again. Now I can start going in some different directions. So I actually have enjoyed that, surprisingly to me. And I know there are some other games that kind of have that 2-phase game system. I don't think I've played any others like that, but I really don't mind it. I'm surprised by that. So I think it's kind of intriguing. What about you, Adam?
The more I play this game, the more I absolutely love that mid-game wipe and kind of refresh. Because that first round, what do you want to do? It's a balance between setting yourself up for that second phase or taking immediate points. Like, do you want to build an extensive network that's going to potentially score twice? That's kind of a one strategy, one way to go, potentially. I just think it adds another neat choice, another layer to the whole puzzle in this game that it feels good to me.
Yeah, and add some more fiddliness that you got to do with that whole cleanup after the first era. So
the math it took a while, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. All right, well, let's jump into the theme and production on this game. The original version of Brass came out, 10 years ago or something like that, and it was a pretty ugly game. I've seen pictures of it. I've never played on it. So when Roxley brought out the Brass Lancaster, which was the kind of remake of the original Brass, and then Brass Birmingham, which is a slightly modified version of it, they went all in on the production here, and I think it's beautiful. A couple quick comments by me. One is that the board is very dark. I feel like it's of the era, but it's not exactly like it's not a space that I want to be living in a lot. So it looks nice. I know that they did a really nice job with it, but it's a little bit of a turnoff for me to say like, hey, I want to go back and kind of be involved with that board. Like it's not a fun space to be sitting in. What do you guys think?
I don't know what it says about me, but I feel exactly the opposite. I want to live in this board. That's one of the things I like about this is I like that art. And in a lot of ways, it reminds me of like the one thing I really enjoyed about Merchants of the Dark Road. It was that dark, brooding, you pictured yourself walking down these, lantern lit side, back alleys where the, unsavory people are doing things. Here it's, walking down the gas lamp lit streets of Lancashire or Gloucester or, whatever in Birmingham. And I actually think that's one of my favorite parts of this game is that it really does put you in the mind of that era. And you feel like you're stepping into Dickens England, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, you said it, Chris. The map here is almost exactly like Merchants of the Dark Road, which was highly praised by everyone, I feel like, last time. Anyway, it has that three-quarter perspective. I think it's cool. It draws me in, and it makes me want to go there. And the one place I want to avoid is Canuck. I heard that place is up to no good.
Yeah, and again, I'm not complaining. I think they did a great job with the production, the art, and it probably feels like, night in industrial, 1860s, England. It's kind of a bleak, dreary setting to be hanging out in. But otherwise, it's all cool. Little cubes for the coal and the iron, which is just fine. It's serviceable. Nothing else here that's really amazing, but it's a good looking production.
I think it's pretty great. Roxy does the nice job, and they have the deluxe edition, I think, comes with some of the iron clays there in the box, and those iron clays are nice and tactile and clanky. And you didn't mention the little beer kegs, Tim. Those things are pretty adorable. I like seeing those out there too.
Yeah, it's definitely a game where you have to appreciate it for, I think, the art more than the other pieces, because there's just not that much with the other pieces. There's a lot of cardboard chits, and so it lives or dies by the art. And I thought it was pretty successful with that.
One thing that's pretty rough with the production is all the different little industry tiles. You have like 10 of the boxes and 10 of the factories, and you have to, when you're setting this up, you have to put them out on your board. So the setup can be a little lengthy with this one. Having an organizer helps, but the game doesn't come with one.
Yeah, I was going to mention that in my final thoughts. Since you mentioned it here, I'll just say that this is going to be a game that would be very hard for me to get out frequently, because the setup on it's massive. And does it pay off? We'll talk about that in a bit, but it is a lot of crazy setup to just to put these little stacks of buildings together. Again, something that very genius in the way it executes once you're playing it. Is it worth it? I don't know. That's a good question. Now, thematically, I do like what the game does here, and they spell it out in the rule book. Why do you have to have routes connected to get coal? Because they needed a ton of coal, so train was the only way to do it, or canals. But iron, you can just get that from anywhere. Why? Because they used such a small amount of iron that they just could carry it with horses or carts or whatever. So you have some cool thematic ties. Why did beer need to be used for manufacturing? Because water wasn't drinkable then. Beer was safer. So, you had to be able to give, to keep your workers healthy in order to use it. So some pretty cool and interesting little ties into the theme and how the mechanisms all fit together here. All right. No comments on that. So let's so let's talk about moments of the game tonight. Anything that stood out to you guys? Chris, how about you?
Yeah, sadly, the moment that stands out to me is the moment where I realized I'd basically thrown the game for two reasons. One, because I completely misunderstood some pretty significant rules, which is probably my biggest complaint about the game at this point. But I'll get into that in final thoughts. And the other thing being that at that same moment, I realized that I had 3 buildings that I built that could have given me a huge point infusion. And I hadn't set myself up to get beer for them. And it was just this huge, can't believe I did that letdown. And I just crashed at that point. And it was just such a bummer.
The beer economy is so funny here, because it's not an economy in like the ore and the coal economy, in that you just pay more. If you can't do something, you just pay more. You just have money and you pay more for it. With beer, if you don't have access to beer, some things you just can't do. And so it can be so much work just to drive to put your network together to get to some beer, and then somebody else builds a building and takes it right before you're going to use it. So it's a pretty challenging puzzle to work around, and can definitely be set yourself up for frustrating moments.
Yeah, and it's kind of like real life. If I don't have a beer in the morning to get me going, I can't work.
Adam, what about you? Any moments that stood out to you tonight?
Well, this whole entire game, my brain was just flowing. That it gives me such a nice vibe. So I think a lot of it, I was watching everybody else's turn to kind of keep track of the rules and making sure everybody was getting their thing going. But a couple things that stood out were, you had a couple turns, Tim, where I think you did you flip 4 tiles in one turn? At least
I think 3 was the max.
Yeah,
but I did 3. Yeah.
I think you had a couple times where you flipped 3, and I was just awed by your ability to put those couple turns together. It was It was pretty neat. So you'd flip two industries and use your beers from the other one. So that would be the third one. It was really cool, Tim. So those are moments that kind of stood out for me. I was watching you do your thing. And then I want to talk about Steve's use of the rail links. I was counting them off at the end. He had like 3 or 4 that were 7 or 8 points in a row, maybe a niner. Did I hear a niner in there? It was amazing how well he used the rail. He ended up crushing everybody by a lot. So I was just impressed with Steve's play tonight too.
Would we say crushing though? I mean, it was only about a 5 or 6 point difference from where I am. Yeah. So my moments came from, there was 2 specific moments that really stood out to me. Number one was that I was last player, as I was a lot of this game, because I was spending a lot of money. And I was sitting in last player space, and we start the round with just a ton of iron spaces open on the iron board. And if anybody builds an iron factory, those are all going to be spent, and they're going to make a ton of money. And it somehow made it all the way down to me, and I got to build an iron factory and sell like $12 worth of iron. And it just like, wow, that's such a cool feeling when that happens. But I think that's a big part of the game, right? It's like so dependent on what the other players are doing. This game is just full of player interaction, and some of it's intentional and some of it's completely accidental about just what can someone else do and what are they trying to do to stop you. Same thing, the last turn of the round, I was setting myself up. I just needed 2 beer to build my final pottery plant, and I thought that was going to give me the game. It didn't end up, but there was 3 beer out there available to me, and I was in last place. So it just depended. Could anyone else use that beer before it could get to me? And if they couldn't, then I had an easy, an easy win there. And if they could, well, ultimately I was able to overbuild a beer plant and build some new beer. So it worked out okay in the end. But the game is just so full of interaction. It's fun and it's interesting and it's frustrating, but it's also a little bit chaotic. Sometimes it feels like the interaction is intentional, as I mentioned, and sometimes it just feels like completely random. We were talking about Steve building those links that created 8 points. Why did that happen this round? Because for some reason, you 3 decided to start building down the bottom left of the board. Why did I get to trigger 3 buildings in a row? Because I was the only one that decided to build up in the top right of the board. And they were both very similar locations, right? They had the same benefits and the same kind of resource things there. So, probably just somebody missed the fact that they should spread out a little bit there or something like that. It's kind of like an area control game or a troops on a map game where your ability to play the game well is going to depend a little bit on other people paying attention to what you're doing or deciding they're going to get in your way. And that's cool. I mean, that's interesting, but it also is a little bit frustrating sometimes when you just don't have any control over what somebody else decides to do and get in your way or makes a bad decision and doesn't go to the other side of the board where they should and instead clumps up and blocks you from doing stuff.
Where they should, huh?
But this game is interesting in that, in this case, the 3 of you clumped down in one corner and Steve benefited from it because he built the links there. So there is a lot of shared benefits and payoffs and negatives and drawbacks depending on what people do. So it's a really interesting set of systems that, continues to surprise me. And I don't know if I'll ever figure this game out, but it's a fun puzzle to work through. So let's talk about our final thoughts and whether we would request to play this game again. How about you, Adam?
Well, hearing you guys talk about this game and bring up some of the points that weren't necessarily favorable for you guys, I understand them all and I get them. Yeah, they all sound like fiddly and weird and frustrating. But man, I absolutely love this game. I love how it feels on my brain. I love working this puzzle through and trying to figure out the best way to use my 2 cards to set myself up or to exploit some little thing and get a bunch of income or get some points, get some flips out there. It's just, I get it. I get what you guys are saying, but I love it. I love the fiddliness that comes with the setup. I don't know. This game just is great. It works for me. Absolutely, I would request to play this game again. One of my favorites.
So I'll jump in. I think Martin Wallace might be a mad genius. I can't imagine the level of thought processing to come up with a game system that has this many moving levers and triggers and things going on, and it somehow all works in such a wonderful, smart package. I will be requesting to play it again. The game is a little bit fiddly and it is a little bit weird. And I just need to not spend so much time away from it. And I need to get it played again soon because it's such a cool interesting game. And I don't think I'll ever be good at it because I like to focus on my own puzzle, and I'm not like watching out what other people are going to do to me and what I should be doing to them. But I don't, it's just so cool. It's so interesting. It's got so many fun decisions to make, so much evolution, everything across the board. You're building out your networks, you're building out your access to resources, you're getting higher level buildings, even if they sometimes don't feel like higher level buildings. But it's a really, really interesting, quirky, and fun system that I would be happy to go back to anytime. So Chris, what about you?
Would I ask for it? No. Would I play it again? I love Adam, and so if he brought it to the table, I'd play it. I'd probably try to convince him to play something else. Honestly, I'm not sure quite what to say about this game because I played it twice now. And the first time I played it, and I thought, this is way too complicated, but I had fun. Tonight I played it, and I thought, it's way too complicated, and I didn't have fun. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that, other than that the common thread between the two is way too complicated. And I get that if I played it 10 more times, I may enjoy it a lot more than I did today or the last time because I know the game better. But, we've said it before, if I've got 10 other games that kind of do the same thing and give me the same feels, and I don't have to play it 10 times to get the basic mechanisms, why would I do that? And so there's plenty of games I can think of that I'd rather play than this. And so I probably wouldn't ask for this one. But again, I'm an outlier here, I guess, because it's on BGG's top two or four, whatever it is that number 3. So take it for what it's worth. 2 experiences.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, and Chris, I think fair criticisms, and I think it is a weird game, and it's not going to be the right fit for everybody. Yeah, it's obviously got some pretty unique things going on here. All right, well, I think that'll wrap up our conversation about Brass Birmingham. We're going to talk about a brass-themed cocktail as well as some games on our table right after this. All right, welcome back. So, Chris, what do you have for us this week?
Oh boy. Well, this week's game set a very clear path for my drink search because beer is actually one of the resources used in the game, right? It doesn't get any clearer than that. But I didn't want to just tell you to go get a 6-pack for your next game because that's just not all that interesting. I'd rather keep things a little bit more interesting than that. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't love a good pint. I mean, I love a good pint. I really love a good pint. So that's not the problem here. But I want to give a little bit of a twist to it. But I digress. So a little research on the magic of the internet, and I came across a way to honor the beer-swilling spirit of brass with a little bit more of modern cocktail ingenuity. But before I get into the recipe, I really want to note that beer did in fact play a significant role in the British Industrial Revolution, for sure. Yeah, it gave factory workers something to look forward to at the end, or maybe even the middle of a hard day. And the other thing that's really interesting about this is that brewers helped spur the revolution by becoming early adopters of a lot of different technologies, like the steam engine, the thermometer, the hydrometer, and the mechanical temperature control. And so these are things that I imagine the designers were thinking about when coming up with this game. And beyond that, it was actually very, very big business. According to the Guardian newspaper, at the outset of the Victorian era, beer was second only to cotton in terms of its contribution to gross domestic product. I mean, can you imagine that? And needless to say, it's also a hearty and charming piece of Great Britain's national identity. According to the Oxford Companion to Beer, the Prince Regent, who eventually became George IV, famously declared that, quote, "beef and beer have made us what we are." So, back to the drink. This one comes to us courtesy of bourbonandhoney.com and is very descriptively named the Bourbon and Honey Beer Cocktail. So here's what you'll need to make 2 drinks worth. 2 ounces of bourbon, a half ounce of lemon juice, 1 teaspoon of honey, 2 dashes of Angostura bitters,
and 2 bottles of some light, refreshing beer like a lager or a pilsner. If you want to be really Northwestern or West Coast, then you get an IPA like Tim did. And then you put all those ingredients, except for the beer, into a shaker with ice, shake it up really good, and then strain that mixture into 2 pint glasses, and then top each one off with a 12-ounce bottle of beer, and then stir and enjoy. I will admit that when you taste this drink, it does not necessarily feel like you belong in industrialized or Industrial Revolution era England. For that, you need a good porter or a Guinness or something like that. In reality, it tastes a lot more like a shandy, which is a light, refreshing drink. But I don't care. It's got beer and it tastes good, and that's enough for me.
This was a delicious drink, Chris. One of my favorite cocktails I think we've had to make. I think I'm just going to start pouring beer on my bourbon going forward here. One thing I thought was interesting with the recipe, though, is that it gave you a recipe for 2 drinks, and they could have easily split it in half. Do you know why they did that in this case? Is that a common thing in cocktail world?
Actually, no. I'm not sure why they did that either. Maybe they didn't want to split that teaspoon of honey into a half teaspoon. I don't know. But feel free to make, just one, have it, or drink 2. That's what I did.
Well, I enjoyed both, so it was good. All right, well, let's talk about some games that have been on our table this week. Chris, what have you been playing?
Well, first of all, I have to say that after you and I played Ark Nova last weekend, Adam and Steve are wrong and you were right. That game is absolutely a blast.
What's wrong with you, Chris?
After I spent all that time talking about how brass is too complicated, Ark Nova is probably the most complicated fiddly game of all. But I don't know, for whatever reason, it clicked with me.
But let me say, though, that I know it feels heavy. It's so easy to understand. And I played it once with Steve and Adam. That was a month ago. And then I got in and I was able to teach it to you. When we reviewed it, I said, I think this is going to be a hard teach. This was not a hard teach. About 15 minutes, I just walked Chris through everything. It was all laid out on the board easily. He did have a few questions during the game, but nothing that I couldn't answer. I think I had to look at the rule book once or twice. But it was really easy to reteach. I didn't have to look up anything. The game is just streamlined. It's got a lot going on, but in a very, very approachable way. So I do think that is not not something to really be worried about after playing it a second time.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And it was, I think one way to distinguish this, at least in my mind, is that there's a lot of complexity there, but it's complexity that is laid out in front of you in a very understandable way. So if you're willing to read through the cards and you're willing to pay attention to what's happening there, it's hard to miss. It takes a little bit more reading and processing of what's happening, as opposed to a game like, Brass or other games that I've played where you have to have in your head this big rule set.
Yeah.
And there's nothing on the board, there's nothing in the game that's going to point you toward the answers, that you have to just kind of know them. And experience will give you that, over time. But this game didn't really require that. It absolutely is something that I think would appeal to folks who enjoy Terraforming Mars. You guys all commented on that, I think. And I think that's part of the reason why Steve, for example, didn't like it, is he doesn't like Terraforming Mars. But if you like Terraforming Mars, this is really charming. The zoo theme is exciting and fun. I enjoyed that. It gives you a lot of those same experiences as Terraforming Mars, but I think it expanded out and gave you even more of them. So more of a good thing. And so I absolutely love that game, and I think I'm going to get myself a pre-order copy of that.
Second play of it, and it reaffirms that it was my 2021 game of the year.
And I also have one other thing to talk about, and bear with me a second while I pull up my information on it here. The other fun thing that I found this week, and this has been in exploring Board Game Arena and also playing with my family. My family has now gotten addicted to Board Game Arena, is the game Abandon All Artichokes. It's a 2020 game designed by Emma Larkins with art by Bonnie Pang and published by Gamewright. And it is such a quick, fun, charming game. I mean, like some of the games we've been talking about recently, like Welcome To, it's not something you're going to sit down for and make this the centerpiece of a heavy-duty game night. But man, what fun. And it's an interesting little twist on the deck builder. They call it a deck destruction or something like that, where essentially what you do is you start with a hand of 10 artichoke cards, and all you're trying to do is get rid of them. You win if you draw a hand of 5 cards that doesn't have any artichokes. So unlike other games like Star Realms, for example, which we all play a lot, where you're trying to maximize the efficiency of your hand and make it so that every card does absolutely the right thing at the right moment. This game, you're just trying to pull as much stuff into your hand and get rid of as many artichokes as you can so that when you draw that 5 card hand at the end of the turn, you're going to pull 5 things other than artichokes. I don't know what the designers have against artichokes, but apparently they're really bad. Personally, I hate them, so this game really resonates with me. But it's such a different feel from other games of this type. And at first I was kind of like, well, that just sounds sort of weird. But once I started playing it, sort of that race to just fill your hand up with other stuff can actually be a lot of fun. And the art is a complete blast. I mean, I just love looking at the art on this thing with these goofy cartoon vegetables that have these funny looks on their faces and these powers that go with them, which, like, I don't know why a carrot lets you do a certain thing, but looking at that carrot with that look in his eye and he's telling me, pick me because I got something for you. I just think that is so much fun. So I would highly recommend that especially for folks on BGA. Super easy to get into it. Takes 5 minutes to learn the game, and it's a quick, easy diversion when you don't have time for something longer and more complicated.
First of all, artichokes are the worst vegetable, so I will be happy to abandon them all. And Adam is shaking his head.
I don't know how I ended up with hosts that could be so wrong about so much stuff and whatnot. Artichokes are amazing, first of all. I had some earlier today. Oh man, because there's fiber and nutrition and good fats. You guys are morons. And then with this whole brass, oh, come on, you guys. This is just a frustrating night. Go ahead, Tim.
Chris, the game sounds so much fun. And I've heard about this game for a while. I've been wanting to play it. I didn't know it was on BGA, so hit me up for a game tomorrow. I want to play it with you. Sounds great.
Totally.
And I was actually going to talk about a different game, but I'm going to have to circle back to that because you just mentioned a deck builder. So now I have to talk about a deck builder that I played this week. This was actually a really interesting couple of weeks for me, is that I played probably a dozen games that I had not played before. And so I have a lot to talk about, but I'm not going to cover them all. I'm just going to cover one. So I'm going to talk about a game that is also a deck builder, and this game is called Art Decko. It's a deck builder, Art Decko. Get it? Right? Decko. And that is the best part about the game, is the pun on the name of the game. So this game is a very, very straightforward deck building game, and the idea is that you're collecting art, works of art of different types, pop art, impressionist art, etc. So there's like 6 different categories of art that you're trying to collect. And there's a market to it. So basically what happens is that at the beginning of the game, all of the art pieces are worth $1. And you're going to start you're going to start the game with a few different pieces of art, all worth $1 a piece, and a couple of coin cards in your hand that are worth $1 or $2 a piece. As you buy more cards from these couple of shared marketplaces, the more art that gets bought, the prices are going to raise on that art. And the way this is tracked is that there's this big market board. And so basically, if you buy a piece of art from the 7-point market space, then it's going to move the art up over seven places. And once it gets to about the 10th place, then it jumps up a whole value. So then art of that type is going to be worth 2 points, etc. And that's going to continue to grow over the course of the game. But the whole point of that is that basically every card in your hand is just a card to buy stuff with, basically, right? And so the art is going to be more valuable. So then you can spend a piece of Art Nouveau for 5 coins later on to buy a bigger piece of art at some point. The only thing that kind of changes that is that as you get high enough, there's a few places in a museum that you can exhibit your art. So if you can spend like 12, 13, 14, 15 coins, you can exhibit specific types of art into these different places in the board. So the whole goal is to collect enough art of certain types, raise the market value, and then be able to pay enough to put them into a kind of a central museum where you're going to get some extra points for it. This is the dullest deck builder I've ever played, and that's saying a lot because I really don't like Dominion. But this game has nothing going on other than you're just buying coins to buy more coins to buy more coins. And I played this on Board Game Arena, which was pretty straightforward and simple and easy to play. But I can't even imagine the idea of having this market where basically there's a central board, and so every time somebody buys a card, you have to track how many spaces the market value of that raises. And then every time it goes up to the next level, the next coin value, everybody has their own individual player boards where then they adjust the value of that coin. So on Board Game Arena, it's great, right? It automatically tells you at the corner of each card what the current value is. In the actual game, you'd be looking at this card and then having to look down at your local player board, and hopefully you remember to adjust the market value after the central market adjusted. This is a hard pass for me. I love the name. Clever idea what they're trying to do with the market here. Just does not work. It's not interesting. I would rather play Dominion over this, and that is saying a lot because I really don't like that game at all. Hard pass on Art Decko. Glad to hear that Abandon All Artichokes did much better things in the deck building world.
Up until the moment where you said how bad this game was, I was like, yeah, man, let's play.
You pulled a very smooth 180, Tim. I was like, you were describing it, Art Deco. What a funny, clever name. I love the name. And it's like this, and like you're talking about. I was wondering how you're gonna make it sound amazing. I was like, okay, art and $1 and this, and the price goes up. And then you did the 180, but boom, and it smacked me in the face. That was fantastic.
Hard pass.
Well, I mean, really, guys, you should,
pass.
let's jump on BGA. Let's play a game of it and see what you guys think. See if I'm way off here. But I played now I got invited by one of our listeners, and they're like, hey, check out this game. I've been having a lot of fun with it. So I played with 2 other people. And first game, we ended, and I was like, that is the dullest game I've ever played. And they said, we think you'll like it better on a second play. So they invited me to a next one. And so we played 3 games in a row, and it didn't get any better. It's not for me, for sure. It's very simple. I mean, maybe it's simple. I don't know. Tracking those prices on a board, I don't know. That doesn't seem fun at all. Anyway, if you guys are interested in just checking it out and see what a really bad game feels like, it's quick and easy to play. So
Inviting me to a dull game, a dull, really bad game. I can't wait.
Never mind.
Terrific.
Let's play something else instead. All right. Adam, what do you had on your table this week?
I opened up Radlands and took a look at the mat, and it's a beautiful game. Chris, you were talking about the art. I went and I got the fancy thing. It's got such a nice production. Roxy again knocks it out of the park. It's got these tokens, these water tokens. They feel like little chunky backgammon pieces. They're beautiful. Water droplet on one side, a little slash on the other side, but they got some heft to them. So did I actually play this game? No, I didn't. I just looked at it and imagined myself playing it with somebody else. So I think very soon I'm going to play me versus me, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, we can meet. Maybe you and I can meet halfway between Long Beach and Portland and get a game in.
If you start driving, if we both start driving now,
we'll be there by morning.
Let's do it.
So I do have one future take for today, and that is a new game that was announced this week, and it's by Garphill Games, which I've been having a lot of fun with some of their recent releases. But they announced a legacy solo game. It's a resettable legacy game, so I guess it's not really a legacy game, but it's a campaign game with legacy style elements where the game changes based on the choices you make. It's shifting decisions. It's opening components out of boxes, that you don't realize it. It's called The Legacy of You. I guess it's based on a real kind of mythology about somebody redirecting floods to protect their lands and fighting off invaders. I don't know. I don't know much about the story, but Legacy and solo, I'm in. Can't wait to play it. Garphill Games has been doing really cool stuff lately. This will be a day one pre-order or retail purchase for me as soon as I don't have to buy it on a crowdfunding platform. I'm excited to check it out and try it out. And this is also the art's by Sam Phillips, who's been doing some of Garphill's recent releases. I believe Sam is Shem Phillips' brother. Shem is the lead designer and owner of Garphill Games. They had worked with the Miko a lot. Shem had worked with the Miko a lot for a lot of the Kingdoms trilogy, the West, North, Out, East, South trilogies. I really like the Miko's art as well. But Sam Phillips has been doing art for their Circadians line as well as like Hadrian's Wall. And I really like his art style as well. So, kind of minimalist, kind of interesting, fun. So I'm really excited to check this game out. And I hope it's cool. Chris, we were just talking about legacy games for 2 players last week. What's the easiest one to get to the table? A legacy game for 1 player. So I'm gonna be digging right into this one.
For sure. I'm fascinated by that idea. I can't wait to hear how that turns out.
Does this game have a name?
Yeah, I did mention it's called The Legacy of You.
That's right.
YU. And it's supposed to release this year. I don't know if they have any specific dates, but they've been pretty good about pushing out content pretty regularly. So I would expect it's going to come out, sometime this year. So that's better than you could say for almost anything you could back on Kickstarter today. So
throwing more Kickstarter shots, huh?
All right. Well, I think that will wrap up this episode of Board Game Hot Takes. If you'd like to hang out and chat with us, you can find us on Twitter at BG_hot takes. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'd love to get your feedback and help other people find the show. Tell your friends about us. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.